Hi, and welcome to How'd You Do That? Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Jim Estill, who is the CEO and president of Danby Appliances and Shipperbee. Jim has invested in plenty of businesses and has been CEO of many other companies, which he will discuss further. In addition, he is a big believer in giving back to the community and a humanitarian. He has sponsored over 250 Syrian refugees and continues to give back as much as he can to others. Welcome, Jim. It is a true pleasure to have you on our show today.
Well, thanks for having me.
So to begin, can you tell us how you grew your first business from zero to $350 million?
Sure. So when I was in university, I was studying engineering. I needed a computer, and I got a better deal if I bought two of them. So I bought two, and then I sold one, and then someone else wanted a computer, so I bought another two, and then someone wanted a printer, and then a printer cable, and then some memory. So pretty soon I was buying and selling computers, and I hired my brother, then I hired a friend, and then I moved into an office, and I just kept on doing that. For many years, and I grew it to eventually 350 million in sales. I was public from the time I was doing about 68 million to 350 million, so I was public for 10 years, and then I sold it to Synnex, and I ran Synnex Canada for 5 years. When I started, the combined entity was 800 million, and when I left 5 years later, we were at 2 billion. So that's why I say, 0 to 2 billion. That's what I did. So.
That's amazing. And can you give us a little detail of how you grew that business to such a large sum?
Sure. I mean, I'd love to say it's because I'm a genius, but part of it was I was on trend, and the trend was everyone was moving to computers. Everything was moving to computers. At the same time, I always say fail often, fail fast, fail cheap. So I tried a lot of things. And people think I'm a genius because when Apple was going bankrupt, I signed Apple as a line. Everyone said, "Wow, you picked Apple." Well, there are other companies you don't even recognize the name of because they went bankrupt. So my model as a distributor was I would normally sign 5 lines. One of them will be a winner. Everyone would think I was a genius. One of them would be a complete loser, go bankrupt, never hear of it. The other 3 would be walking wounded. They did okay, but they didn't, And then sometimes even one of the walking wounded would become a great company, or sometimes they go away. So a lot of it had to do with trying a lot of things and then going more with the ones that worked. And when you're starting a business, that's a good way to do it. So you can do this on YouTube and say, "Oh, gee, YouTube gets you lots of traction," or you can do it as a podcast and say, "Oh, that's what gets you the traction," or you can put it on a blog and say, "That's what gets the traction," or you can, and then you'll just put more energy into the ones that work.
Right. No, that makes complete sense. And even from the beginning, you were part of RIM before it even became big.
Yeah. So that was so I became fairly successful in my computer business, and I would see a lot of technologies come across my desk, and I invested in a lot of those companies. So I actually ended up investing in 150 technology companies, and one of those was BlackBerry before they were. They had 200 employees. So I got a position on their board of directors before they actually went public. So I was there for the first 13 years. So people say I worked at BlackBerry. I never worked at BlackBerry. I was on the board, which is a different thing than actually being an employee. But I certainly saw their growth from the 200 to 18,000 employees and learned a ton. When I joined them, I was the big company and they were the small company. I had taken my company public by the time I joined that board, and I'm in Guelph and they're in Kitchener or Waterloo, and at the time my company was bigger than they were, and that's partly why they invited me to join their board.
Right. What was the name of your company at the time when you started up?
So my company was EMJ Data Systems, but okay. The company that bought mine is called Synnex, SYNNEX. But most people won't know the name because we were a silent middleman. We would buy toner cartridges from Hewlett-Packard or HP and sell them to Best Buy and sell them to Staples and sell them. So we had very serious market share in the channel. So people knew us in the channel, but they didn't know us at the end user level. So when I left Cynics, we had a 50%, 50% market share in all toners, all inks, all brands of printers. We had an 80% market share in Autodesk, which is a CAD software. We had 66% market share in Apple selling in Canada, except that Apple sold to some customers direct. But it's the silent middleman. And people say, oh, middleman is going to add expense. But in reality, we didn't add expense. Rather, we shared our overheads amongst multiple manufacturers. So when we would ship to a Staples store, we'd ship skid to Staples. Well, they needed 5 HP toners, but they needed 2 Lexmark toners, and they needed 5 Brother toners, and they needed a camera and a printer and some memory. And so it's much cheaper for us to ship that than for Canon to ship a camera separate, and it makes it easier for the customers, one billing and that sort of thing. So it's all about sharing the overheads. That's what distribution is all about.
Right. No, and that makes complete sense. Having been in distribution myself, your competitor. So I'm still trying to understand. So what exactly, you grew the business to such a large. You grew in terms of numbers, number of employees, just exponential growth, phenomenal growth. Is there like a trick behind it? Is there a strategy behind it? What's your secret?
Well, everybody wants to know the one secret, but you've been in distribution. The key in distribution is not one thing. It's all the little things. So what I seek is a bunch of tiny competitive advantages. And if I have tiny competitive advantages, I can win. So an example in Danby right now. Danby, I went out to the warehouse and we had this much space in the top of the container that was air coming in from China. And I said, well, what can we put in that space? So we went to a electric kettle manufacturer, said, can you make kettles and put Danby on them? So we don't make the kettles, but now I have no shipping cost coming from China on that. What's that? A tiny competitive advantage. Does that make Danby? No, but it's that little piece. Like tabletop appliances, I'd be surprised if we do like $500,000 a year out of our $400 million in sales. But it's still a little bit more that we can do and have competitive advantage. And so it's all about the little things. I know one thing in distribution, I lucked out, and it literally was lucking out by living in and working in Guelph. So when I opened my company, I said I needed to be in Toronto. I opened in Toronto. I was there for a year, and I got sick of driving. I lived in Guelph because I went to the University of Waterloo, and so, so I got sick of driving, opened the business in Guelph. And at that time, particularly, Guelph was much lower overhead than Toronto. My space rental was less, my staff cost less, traffic was less, and I could pay someone less per year, and they had a much better lifestyle because they could buy a house for $500,000 or $250,000 less or $100,000 less, and their commute to work would be 6 minutes instead of whatever it is my competitors had.
Right. No, that makes complete sense. So, you're talking about Danby now, your current business. You have 100% ownership in this company. Can you talk a little bit more about that and, why you decided to take over Danby?
Sure. So I retired from Cynics and I moved to New York, and I was doing some angel and venture capital, and I sat on some boards. My dad got sick, so I moved back to Guelph because he lived in Guelph, and I happened to sit on the board of Danby Appliances and a few other boards. But then the CEO resigned, and I said, I can go in and run it. And getting back in and running a business, I said, that's what I want to do. So that's going to be my next decade. I'm going to run Danby. And then the family that owned it said they wanted me to sell it. And I said, well, how much for? They told me, and I said, okay, fine, I'll take it. So that's how I ended up buying Danby.
Wow, that's a phenomenal story. And how does one get on boards? Is it your success of running many other businesses? Is that the best way, or?
Yeah, like you can take courses on boards and you can put your resume out. I'm telling you're not going to get hired very likely. Now, there is a trend right now towards boards adding females, and you might have some chance getting on because they like non-white females even better than white females. So but you don't want to be a quota number. The real way to do it is to you get to know people get to know me, and then they invite me to the board. So John Wood, who owned Danby Appliances and Wood's Freezers, is a Guelph company. When my company was tiny, I had 10 employees. He had 1,200 employees in Guelph. So I wanted to learn, how do I grow my business? I called John. I went out for coffee with him. I had lunch with him. So over a decade, I would meet with him on some frequency, not every other month, once a quarter. But I got to know him. And then when he looked at forming a board, he thought of me because by then my company had been more successful. But really, it's your track record of success that gets you on boards. And I have people approach me all the time. Oh, I took a director's course. I want to get on a board. Well, it doesn't work that way.
So it's all about networking then.
It is about networking. But see, to a certain extent, reputation and success builds more success. So it's actually easier for me to get things done because I've been successful in the past. Mm-hmm. And so I can, day before yesterday, I met with the former CEO of Hewlett-Packard. Why does he return my call? Because I did business with him back then, and because I was running a substantial company. Well, of course, what's he doing now? He happens to be on the board of Canada Post, and I wanted to talk to him about Canada Post. So it's easier for me having had a history of success. But it's never too late to start as well. So.
Right. No, that's wonderful. Now I know you're like we've talked about now you being on Danby. That's your business that you're running right now, and you're doing again phenomenal, great success, great growth. What new innovations have you made at Danby?
Well, the biggest innovation that will transform the company is I'm sitting in the warehouse of the factory and I'm saying, well, what else can we make in the factory? And we normally think we're an appliance company. We'll make another appliance. And I thought, no, we're a company that makes big boxes. So I said, well, and I'm reading about trends. And one of the reasons I was successful, I think, in my previous business, I was on trend. So the computer business was growing at 20 or 30% per year. So I could easily grow by 20, 30, 40% per year. Parcels is growing by 20% per year. Parcel theft is growing by more than that. So we designed a smart parcel mailbox, which allows you to get your Amazon delivery. You get an email or a text to say the parcel arrived. You can look on the camera anytime, 24 hours a day, to see who's there or see who delivered it. It's got a car alarm, so if someone tries to break into it or move it, it sends you an email or a text, and it screams at them. And so it's lots of neat features, and I'm approaching that like we do wine coolers. We will have bigger ones, and we'll have stainless steel ones, and we'll have black ones because you like a black one and someone else wants a bricked one. So we'll have a family of parcel mailboxes, and I believe within the next decade, most households will have some sort of a parcel solution. And will it be all ours? No. You might You might say, no, I want the person to come into my house and deliver. You'll give them the punch lock. Someone else is going to say they put an ante room on their garage. Someone else is going to only ship goods to the office. But it only takes a tiny percentage of people to adopt a parcel mailbox, and we can be very successful. So that's a big example. A tiny example is I always look at scrap. So I went out and looked at what are we sending out to be recycled, and I saw wine coolers going out sometimes. Wine coolers looks like a refrigerator, but it's got a glass door. And I said, well, what else could we do with that? The compressor doesn't work, so we took the compressor out, put in grow lights, and came up with a product which we call Danby Fresh to allow you to grow fresh herbs or vegetables or wheatgrass inside. And I'm a gardener. It's one of my hobbies, so I'm attracted to, I grew up in Woodstock, agriculture, farm type background. So now that product, though, will never be huge. I think 0.01% of the population will want that. Another thing I'm a health guy. So I think, I want fresh vegetables. I want vegetables I grew. I want to harvest them and eat them, not go down to the grocery store and buy them. And they were harvested a week ago, and what chemicals did they put on them and stuff like that. So it's on trend with me. And again, it's a product that not everybody will need or want. But on the other hand, we sell a lot of wine coolers. You don't need one of those. You can live a long time without a wine cooler.
Right. That makes sense. And you've also got another business called ShipperBee.
Yes.
Can you tell what that is?
Sure. So ShipperBee is a courier. which would compete with FedEx or UPS. And the main claim to fame is we save 73.1% of the greenhouse gas per parcel shipped. And now that's a bold claim, but that was independently substantiated. And the way we do that is we've taken away the hub and spoke. So right now, most couriers ship, all couriers ship hub and spoke. So to ship a parcel from London to Woodstock goes from London to Mississauga to Woodstock. It's all backtracking. What we do is we've designed a transfer mailbox, which we call a hive because the name of the company is ShipperBee, and the parcel would get picked up in London, dropped in the hive at the 401, picked up at that hive, dropped in Woodstock at the hive at the 401, and then someone would take and deliver it to the house. The reason for the energy savings is partly no hub and spoke back and forth, but the bigger reason is the power of while. And that's something I actually wrote a time management book 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and in it I had a chapter on the power of while. What can you do while you're doing something else? And so what you would do is you would say, I am going to Toronto from Guelph, and I put it in, and it would say, great, pick up 10 parcels at the Petro-Canada here, drop them off at the Esso station on your way. Well, I'm driving anyways, no extra greenhouse gas except for the time off the highway and the time back on the highway. And we did a survey of commuters, and 84% of the commuters who commute for more than half an hour each way say they drive parcels if you paid for their gas. So, and it makes sense because everybody wants a side hustle. Everyone needs to make a little bit extra money, but they don't want to actually spend the time. So you probably don't want to be an Uber driver. You could be an Uber driver, but then you've got to have someone in your car, and then you're going to have to drive till 2 o'clock in the morning to make money and whatnot. But you're already driving to work, or you're already making a sales calls in London or wherever you're going, may as well make money. So it's a side hustle without the work is what we say. So that's what ShipperBee is. And I am so bold as to say, I believe ShipperBee is to the parcel shipping industry just like Uber is to taxi, just like Airbnb is to hotels, because it makes so much logical sense. You're already driving. You may as well take parcels. So that's my rave on ShipperBee. You can tell I'm excited.
This is amazing. I mean, you find ways to help with the environment, and also the strategy is that's, you know, one would never think that, you know what, we could use other people to deliver our products where we need them. That's great. That's great. That's wonderful. Your innovations, you know, you think outside the box, and you think, you know, other ways. Okay, how can we help with the supply chain and so on and so forth. So that's great. I think a lot of us could use a lot of your knowledge. Now, you're not only a businessman, but you're also someone who gives back. So a few years ago, you had sponsored more than 250 people from Syria, which is about 58 families. What led you to the decision of sponsoring them?
Well, largely, I could just see the crisis happening in the world. I didn't think the government was acting. I didn't think the world was working fast enough. So I did what business people do. How can I solve the problem? And I found out Canada has a private refugee sponsorship, which would allow me to sponsor. So I put my hand up and said, I'll sponsor. At that time, I said I'd sponsor 50 families. And I didn't think it was that big a deal because I've donated lots of money to other causes that it doesn't make it a big deal. But for some reason that caught the press attention. And then I ended up with tons of press, and I became the poster child of refugee. So since then I've sponsored over 100 families. Wow. And I've got tons more coming in. And I set up a system. I organized it like a business, but it's all volunteers. So I've got a director of housing and a director of education, a director of health, and director of mentorship. And every family that comes in has 4 or 5 mentor families, and the mentor families have checklists and scorecards. So the checklist is get a bank account, test the parents for English and register them in ESL school, register the kids for school, get a bus pass, ride the bus with them, of course set up the housing, get a doctor, get a dentist, all of these sorts of things. So it's all done checklist or scorecard, because I know you don't do things on scale. If I have to go to the airport and pick up, I was only going to do 50 families, but even if I go to the airport to pick up 50 families, it's not happening. Like right. There's too much time, so I scale it through other people. So I ended up with 800 volunteers to help with that, but they give me the credit, but it's not me that's the credit. They do all the work. Although I will say it is somewhat time intensive for me because I do visit the families occasionally, and having brought in well over 100 families, even if I visit, well, you can do the math. If I visit 2 families a week, then that's a year, right? If
Right.
I visit, you know. So what
Wow.
I will say is I drink a lot of tea because you go and they drink tea. It's just fortunate that they don't drink wine, or else I would need to have a driver.
That makes sense. And throughout, and now just going back to business again, throughout each and every business that you've owned, um, we've talked about that, you've got created a lot of growth. Is there somebody that's helped you along the way with that growth? I mean, like, is there somebody that inspires you, that helps you with that?
Absolutely. I mean, every time you talk to the media, they want to say, "Oh, it's me that did it." Oh, you just doubled a Danby size. No, I didn't do it. I don't do anything. I've got people that do it. So I don't do any work. All my people do all the work. As far as growing the business, one trick that I will pass to you is when I was doing 10 million, I knew I wanted to double and be 20 million. So I would figure out who can I talk to that does 20 million. I talk to someone who does 20 million. I read books about people doing 20. And then I'd say, well, next step is 100 million. So I'd read books. And that's why I was friends with John Wood, because he, at that time, was running a large manufacturing company in Guelph with 1,000 employees. And he was one of the people that I looked to for help. The other thing I do when I have a problem, I study. So this day and age, it is so easy to study. So if you've got a problem, you go to YouTube, and there's lots of videos on it. You go to the internet and use Google, and you can read a ton. So even when I got into the refrigeration business at Danby, all I did is I spent an hour a day for 3 weeks on how refrigeration works. And now my engineers think, wow, you must be a seasoned refrigeration engineer. No, I got that all in 20 hours on the internet. That's all you need.
Right. No,
All I
that that makes sense. And I think a lot of us, we use YouTube for a lot of that, just to get the basic general knowledge. So that,
exactly. And flipping back to the power of while, you're doing this as a podcast. Podcasts are the best power of while. You should never drive unless you're listening to a podcast or an audiobook. Period. End of story, in my opinion. Because you're going to have time. Even I don't have a long commute to work. I get through hours and hours of audio. And so then people think, wow, Jim, you've read a lot. Well, I've read a lot, but I've listened to a lot too.
right. So you multitask, or in a sense that you used your time wisely to ensure that, you're driving. We might as well listen to something that's inspirational or.
Exactly. Now, interesting you say multitasking. I actually don't believe in multitasking.
Okay.
So
The door.
I believe, but power of while is different than multitasking. Power of while, I actually am driving safely. So I guess someone could say that's multitasking, but it's not really. Another one that I'm famous for is I do walking meetings. So
Okay.
I do walking meetings with my staff. I do walking meetings with people who are up for it or game for it. I've got a little trail that I go on. And why is that? I'll get a little bit of exercise. They'll get a little bit of exercise. Being outside, it's better than being inside. I mean, I've got a boardroom, just like everybody else has a boardroom or an office, but that's not very exciting. So I've talked to people 10 years after I had one walk, and they say they remember the walk. And they wouldn't have remembered it in my boardroom because I like to think I have a nice boardroom, but it's not that. It's the same as any other boardroom.
Right. No, that's wonderful, and I think more companies should utilize that practice because you're getting fresh air. It's going straight to your head. You're understanding, and like you said, people remember those meetings, and those meetings is what you want. You want people to remember those meetings, and it leaves an impact.
Exactly. And a walking meeting is also leveling. So the problem I have, I'm CEO, so I want to walk with one of my lead hands. Then we're both walking the same way. We're shoulder to shoulder. It's not intimidating. If I bring someone into my office, then it's me over them, and so it helps to level. My other experience is being outside. It's tough to be upset, so to speak. Like you're just happier outside.
Right.
I should be doing this outside. Lots of snow out there.
Let's go get some fresh air.
Exactly.
during the snowstorm. And so what's next for you? I mean, you've done a lot. I mean, you've grown businesses from nothing to something huge. You continue to you take on businesses. You invest in a lot of businesses. I mean, it seems like luck is and success is just happens to follow you. Is that how you feel too?
Absolutely. I wake up every day grateful for what I have. Actually, I think that's another success habit that everyone should get into, and that is gratitude habit. And someone who's listening or watching this might say, yeah, but I don't have what Jim has. I learned from the Syrian project, The Secret to Happiness. The secret to happiness is being grateful for what you have, not ungrateful for what you've lost or ungrateful for what other people have. And anyone listening to this, watching this, I'm telling you, you've got a lot to be grateful for. And my guess is you're not going to be hungry tonight. And if you're hungry tonight, it's only for a few days. It's not going to be, this is a first world problem. What, your computer hung? Oh, well, that's a really tough life you've got. Your Bluetooth battery wasn't charged.
That's true. And you know, now that I think about it, there's a old Indian saying, and basically what they say is, you know, if something bad happens, it's always for the better. And even whether something happens or not, if it happened in the past, you know, if it doesn't happen in the past, it's okay. And if it doesn't happen, and that's still okay. And if it's gonna, and you know, if you don't find it nothing good in the future, it's still okay. Everything's okay. We all learn from our mistakes. The biggest thing is, maybe I'm not explaining it as well, but the key thing is that even bad things that happen to us, there's always a good in it. And that's what we have to understand.
That is absolutely 100%. And part of it is to not dwell and think it is bad. It's my fail often, fail fast, fail cheap. I've done lots of business ventures that have failed completely, like gone out of business. And distribution, lots of product lines that went out of business, didn't sell any. I've got, in my warehouse, I would have products that I bought that don't sell for the price I thought I could sell them for. But you still do well. Now, of course, I'm going to learn, oh, maybe we shouldn't be doing that product. Maybe we should be doing this different. People don't like buying pink refrigerators. I learned that.
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, you learn from your mistakes, and mistakes are not bad. And failure is not bad. Failure is good. It helps you grow, and it makes you realize, you know, the different avenues you can take so that you don't make the same mistakes again.
Exactly. The failure is one who doesn't try. People who try will have failures, but that's okay.
That's okay. So what's next on your plate, Jim?
Well, you've touched on the two big ones. I'm doing Parcel Guard is big and fairly transformational for Danby, and Shipper Bee. Shipper Bee on scale, saving 73.1% of the greenhouse gas, can be my environmental legacy. This can be massively huge. This can be uber scale. So I'd love to do another BlackBerry where I am the CEO and I'm doing it. So that's really taking most of my time. And I know that the people listening to your podcast and your video are often business people. So I will also leave them with health trumps wealth.
Right.
So look after your health. Time management is partly about time management, but a lot of it's about energy management. If you're not healthy, you don't have the energy. And so look after your health and don't shortcut that, because sometimes people just say, oh, you're going to wake up old, may as well fight it.
Right. And you know, with all the work that you do you have something that's that you're passionate about, that you find that's, you know, helped you along the way?
I don't have anything huge. I do believe in meditation, and I think that that's something people should study and should do some of. So that would be one seed, and the other is just the health thing is very, very important in my opinion. I also believe if you think you're good, you're going to get killed. So we're all on a continuum, and you're never good enough, and you always have to learn. So I'm a continual learner, learn every day, and I think ego kills companies. So ego is, if you left the podcast and said, you know, Jim has high ego, then that's the worst insult you could give me. You can say that this guy's ugly. You can do that, but don't say that the guy is not humble, if that makes sense.
Right. No, and you definitely are humble. I've spoken to you a few times now, and even via email, and you're very humble, and you're very down to earth. And so, sometimes some people, the success of it all gets to their head, and you're definitely not one of those people.
Exactly. So keep learning. Keep learning.
Right. And any last words before we end the podcast today?
No, not that I can think of. And thank you very much for inviting me on your podcast.
Thank you, Jim.